A mysterious Roman grave, uncovered in London. A new interpretation of an ancient relic. Two breakthroughs, combining to write a new chapter in the history of the Roman Empire. The story of the Gladiatrix. Roman London in the late 1st century AD, teeming with 20,000 people under the iron fist of Roman rule. At the city's heart was the amphitheatre, a melting pot for every creed and culture of the Roman Empire, every level of society from slave to senator. The home of a violent spectacle designed to entertain the legions and appease the masses. The home of the gladiators. But by AD 70, the spectacle of man slaughtering man was not enough. The mob demanded variety as well as blood. "2,000 years after the Romans conquered Britain, the Museum of London is unravelling the city's brutal history. In 1996, an excavation in Great Dover Street, Southwark, uncovered a mysterious grave. The site now houses students, directly above this gateway to London's Roman past.
Presumably all the way down to the end of the red building there was part of your excavation. And where was the burial itself?
The burial would be just in this area here.
Just underneath the...
underneath the building.
Underneath the red walls.
Around 30 Roman graves were found on the Great Dover Street site, but archaeologists soon focused their attention on just one. The grave was filled with artifacts suggesting wealth and status, but it was clear that these were the bones of no ordinary wealthy citizen. The unusual position of this grave was the telling factor.
It did at first appear, from the reports that were coming from the excavation, that the burial was actually in a quite different context to the other burials there, and more particularly, that it was isolated by itself, and that in fact the Dover Street burial, although to some extent peripheral, was indeed part of the whole cemetery complex.
This was one of the most lavish Roman graves ever found in Britain, but it was placed among the paupers.
The excavation showed us that there was a walled cemetery with a possible mausoleum, but this burial was actually beyond that, outside the area. Now, if you've got someone who's wealthy and influential and part of Roman society, you would expect them to be buried in the walled cemetery, perhaps with their own mausoleum.
This contradiction was to spark an archaeological mystery.
Obviously, one starts to speculate, why is this so? Why have we got this very elaborate, rich burial ceremony going on? That speculation, to some extent, starts to fuel the idea of social exclusion. Is this person deliberately being excluded from the normal burial area?
The outcasts of Roman society included slaves, criminals, and prostitutes. All would have been banished to the fringes of a Roman cemetery. None would have been given a ceremonial funeral. Only one extraordinary group had the power to overcome this social stigma and move at will through the different levels of Roman London's rigid class system. The gladiators. The idea of the gladiator was born when slaves or prisoners of war were made to fight to the death at the cremation ceremonies of wealthy citizens. But a gladiator could achieve nobility through courage in the face of death. He was then judged suitable to guide the dead aristocrat through the underworld. And the entrance to that underworld was the amphitheatre. For the pleasure of the crowd, the gladiators were taunted by a figure representing Mercury, the Roman messenger of the gods, who roamed the underworld. After a contest, Mercury made a show of dispatching the fatally injured. This role was sometimes played by Anubis, the jackal-headed Egyptian god of judgment and gatekeeper to the underworld. Significantly, 3 lamps depicting Anubis, along with a lamp showing a fallen gladiator, were found in the Great Dover Street grave, the first concrete evidence directly linking its occupant to the world of the gladiators.
We had 8 lamps that hadn't been used. 4 were just plain, but the other 4 had depictions on them that made us think that perhaps they had been chosen for their symbolism rather than for the fact that they were just lamps. We have this lamp that shows a fallen gladiator, someone who's fallen in battle and is actually holding up their hand to sort of protect themselves.
In Roman Britain, it is very unusual to find multiple lamps in a burial. Normally, I'd expect to see 1, maybe 2 lamps, but to find 8 is really unique and outstanding.
The same lamps also determined the date of the burial.
So 4 of the lamps in our burial are picture lamps. And these sort of lamps, we know from dated contexts, occur from about AD 20 onwards into the 1st century, and then they peter out in Britain. The other 4 lamps are what are called factory lamps. These factory lamps only occur in about AD 70, and then again they carry on into the 2nd century. So we have one type that's petering out in popularity and one type that is becoming popular. And where the overlap is, that's where I would date this burial. That would be about AD 70 or 80.
By AD 70, gladiators had been in combat for around 400 years. There is evidence of them throughout the former Roman Empire. But until now, no identifiable human remains of a gladiator had ever been found. When the broken fragments of bone found in the Great Dover Street grave were examined, they were definitely human. But the most amazing revelation was to come. The largest piece was from the pelvis, the bone that identifies sex. If this was a gladiator, she was female. A gladiatrix.
Most people have always thought that gladiators is essentially something that big, butch men, Charlton Heston, whatever you like, do in the arena. So the idea that it could have been a woman was, to many people, a complete surprise.
And people then started saying, well, what have we got here? Could we possibly have a female gladiator? That really made everyone go, no, don't believe that. But when you sort of looked at all the facts, you realised that it was a possibility, that this could be something really quite amazing.
27 sites, it's about 50, 60 pallets. And we start 381.
The pelvic bone and others were catalogued and put away. But now they've gone missing in the Museum of London's vast warehouse. They know it's here somewhere, lost among 20,000 boxes.
Well, we've been through 60 pallets of material from about 27 sites. That's about 3,500 boxes. And we've had no luck at all. So we've looked previously where she's supposed to be, nothing. We've looked at where she could have ended up by chance, nothing there. So the next step really is to look where she shouldn't be.
The museum has too many skeletons in its closet. The missing pelvis has yet to be rediscovered. Thankfully, some of the bones were kept on public display and have been returned safely to the museum's archaeological service. The original identification was made by osteoarchaeologist Bill White. He's joined by human remains specialist Jackie McKinley, who thinks that wear and tear in the bones might allow an additional estimate of the woman's age.
So we know it's female, basically.
Yes. Pieces of skull.
Oh, it's a toe bone there, look.
Yes.
That's the, in fact, it's the big toe on the left foot, isn't it? And that's a cervical vertebra. I mean, they're relatively small, aren't they?
Yes,
they're
a
fairly
lot of
small
shrinkage.
size. Well, I don't know. I mean, even for cremated bone, that's
so small.
that's still relatively small, yeah.
They need to find another fragment of pelvic bone.
All we were just trying to do is see if we could find that bit of iliac.
That's it. That's it. That's actually a tiny, it's small, I know, but it is
Well
a piece
done.
of fused
Just
iliac crest.
Yeah.
So basically, we're talking about sort of that area there, but whereas this isn't fused, that is, you can see it's fused, which suggests that our individual is probably over 30, since the crest fuse is about 25 to 30 years. Right.
There are no indications of degenerative disease as of the joints and vertebral column.
Yeah, so we've got female from the pelvis, general size of the bone, robusticity, and we've got, she's probably sort of in her 30s.
That would be a best guess.
Something along those lines.
Slender and healthy, in the prime of life, could Great Dover Street Woman be the first ever discovery of a gladiator's remains? The amazing possibility gathered momentum. Archaeologists were assembling the pieces of an intricate jigsaw puzzle to reveal the full landscape of Roman London. Great Dover Street Woman's age turned out to be crucial. She reached her prime just a few years after London's amphitheatre opened its gates for the first time. And the Museum of London's archaeologists would soon link her directly to the bloody arena. By AD 70, the Roman Empire stretched across Europe and Africa. Gladiatorial combat was mainstream entertainment, and the legions brought it to London. The Romans put the city on the map and wrote its name in gladiators' blood. Years of painstaking archaeology have provided the data for a new computer model. To Britons, this was a futuristic city. A bridge crossed the River Thames, and there was a planned layout of roads, villas, and two-story buildings. And at centre stage, the edifice of the amphitheatre loomed over the city. Nine years before the Museum of London found the grave in Great Dover Street, they had uncovered the amphitheatre a mile to the north, on a site earmarked for a new art gallery. In the Corporation of London's Guildhall Yard, a ring of black slates now traces the circumference of the killing grounds discovered 20 feet below. Nick Bateman led the archaeological team. He now returns to the site where thousands must have died, with the cheers of the city ringing in their ears.
Wow, what a change. So this is about the first time for 5 years that I've been down here. Of course, we're now underneath London. We're now, I don't know, about 20 foot down in the basement of the new art gallery. This is the original Roman level, the ground level of the amphitheatre. And behind these walls here behind these modern breeze block walls lies the preserved remains of the amphitheatre walls themselves. This, of course, is the east entrance into the amphitheatre. Now starting to walk down the entranceway.
"6,000 people could have packed the ancient amphitheatre, 1/3 of the entire population. The equivalent of 2 million modern Londoners baying for blood.
The whole amphitheatre itself dates from AD 70. And we know this because we found several, more than one, timber, which through tree ring dating, dendrochronology, we've established a very accurate date of spring of AD 70 for the felling of those timbers. So very shortly after that, the first amphitheatre was built.
In AD 70, the woman found in the Great Dover Street grave was in her prime, and the contents of her grave were to provide persuasive evidence that she was a gladiatrix. An important clue was the fragrant aroma of incense. The Great Dover Street grave was littered with incense, along with decorative ceramic burners for its use. Hot on the scent, archaeologists followed a trail that would lead them all the way back to the amphitheatre. The incense came from cones of the stone pine, a tree that's native to the Mediterranean. In the 1st century, archaeologists believed this tree was growing in only one place in Britain, right outside the London amphitheatre.
So, Damien, where was this stone pine found?
It was found just down there, which is about 20 metres outside the back wall of the amphitheatre. And the thing that was so exciting about it was that this is the first time we found any kind of pine wood of any kind in England after the Bronze Age.
Yeah.
And it's a completely unique find because we didn't have any pine trees in England at that time. We were pretty certain quite quickly that it was actually stone pine, which we know the Romans were particularly keen on.
The Romans planted stone pine all around their amphitheatres. The branches offered shade to the crowds, and the cones were burned as incense to cover the stench of blood and gore. The London amphitheatre was no different, and when stone pine was also found in the Great Dover Street grave, there was a direct link from the woman who lay there to the gladiatorial games.
The interesting thing is that we know that the stone pine was used extensively for incense, and we know that what went on in the amphitheatre was intensely ritualized. There was an elaborate series of preparatory and concluding rituals, and it's almost certain that burning of incense was an essential part of it.
For a gladiator who achieved glory in the arena, the elaborate ritual of daily life was mirrored in death. And there is no doubt that incense played a part in the unique and intensely ritualized burial of Great Dover Street woman. Her bones are probably the remnants of a bustum cremation, an elaborate funeral pyre so rare that it implies an important death. Only 20 have ever been found in Britain. If Great Dover Street woman did receive such a funeral, it would be in keeping with the status of a successful gladiator. Forensic expert Jackie McKinley aims to find out if a bustum cremation would produce human remains like those found in the grave.
We'll try and keep the sides quite straight.
Intricate preparation and strenuous effort are required, demonstrating the respect and care involved in this form of ceremony.
What we're doing over here is building a particular type of cremation pyre, and this is called a bustum. This is peculiar in Britain to the Roman period, and the difference between this and normal cremation pyres was it has a fairly large pit underneath it. With cremated remains in that everything sort of disappears to a dust or an amorphous blob. What actually happens is that you're oxidising and dehydrating the body. So all the organic components of the body, the soft tissues and the organic components of the bone, which is about 30%, are being burnt away, and you're going to be left with the inorganic components of the bone. So you do get a completely recognisable skeleton. It changes in colour and it shrinks and it twists and will fracture, but you do get identifiable pieces of bone at the end of it. The pyre structure is designed to serve two basic purposes. One, of course, is fuel. The second one is to provide a stable platform that will hold the body in what is basically the hottest part of the fire.
Jackie has calculated exactly how much wood to use from the size of existing bustum sites. Her structure is precise. It's a furnace that will burn hot enough to melt copper, but not, perhaps, enough to completely incinerate a corpse. The pyre is completed with flesh and bone.
Well, this is a deer that we have from the butchers. Technically speaking, what we're hoping is that it should stay at the top, where it is now, basically. So she's going to get a good send-off. The key to it is that it's a ritual process. That's what's important about it, that you've gone through this ritual act.
As the temperature rises, the bustum pyre holds the deer carcass in position. Muscle and fat begin to melt. The organic parts of the bone are burning away.
Well, this is a thermocouple that's attached to a meter reader. And what I'm going around and doing is actually taking temperature readings at different parts of the pyre during the cremation process, so we can see how the temperature's changing. As you say, this reading's actually just going up at the moment.
The carcass moves down the pyre in a controlled descent.
It's not going to just all go at one go. It'll probably go down in a series of layers. Basically, as one set of logs burn away, one tier burns away, the whole lot will start to drop, and it will slowly fall down and hopefully end up in the pit.
But 1,000 degrees centigrade may not be enough to destroy the hard mineral sections of bone. Will the remains be similar to those found in the Great Dover Street grave?
Well, this is about 16, 17 hours now since we lit it, but it's still going away quite happily there. During the main burning process, we had got to 900, 1,000 degrees centigrade. Towards the end, when most of the pyre had actually dropped down, I had thermocouples in the wood ash in the pit, and that was still at 850,
to 900 degrees centigrade after about 2 hours, while most of it was down in there. So we're still getting very, very hot temperatures.
The similarities suggest that Great Dover Street woman was cremated with equal care.
They are still complete bone, although that broke as I picked it up. It's still a very recognisable bone. You still see that that's a phalanx. You can still recognise quite happily bits of vertebra, bits of skull. So it's still identifiable material. It's not going to disappear to dust necessarily.
The unique bustum ritual of Great Dover Street woman's death suggests that she was an important figure. In all likelihood, a gladiatrix. But one historian believes it can be interpreted in a different way. The picture lamps, incense burners, and distinctive pine cones may point instead to her religion.
When I first heard about the finds at Dover Street, I was absolutely convinced that we had the burial of a devotee of Isis found at a site in Southwark, which is not far from where we believe there was a temple of Isis. We've even got a jug with an inscription saying Londini ad Farnham Isidis. This is just contributory evidence for the existence of this exotic and I should say very beautiful cult in the capital.
The inscription at London in the Temple of Isis denoted the Egyptian goddess of fertility. Her guide through the underworld was Anubis, the jackal-headed god whose image adorned 3 lamps found in the grave.
Prior to this find, there were only 2 other Anubis lamps from the whole of Britain. There are 8 incense burners there as well, so it seems to me that this burial is about having intense light and purifying smells as part of a funerary rite. I think it might indicate somebody who has beliefs that are different from the majority of the population, maybe, Eastern beliefs quite possibly. Because the same combination of objects, lamps, incense burners and burned pine cones, also occurs in a number of temples of Eastern deities.
But religion does not explain the image of a fallen gladiator on another lamp found in the grave. And a gladiatrix would have no need of religion to be conscious of the god Anubis, recognizing him as her sinister companion to the underworld following a violent death in the arena. Nor does religion explain why this wealthy woman was laid to rest in an area of exclusion among the poor. But the cult of Isis was embraced by women in particular, and a gladiatrix would have been a natural follower.
It is possible that we have here a wealthy and influential follower of the goddess Isis, but who is also a female gladiator, and one possibility doesn't rule out the other. It could be a combination of the two.
The overall evidence suggests that whether or not she was a follower of Isis, she was probably a gladiatrix. And more evidence can be found in the history of the period. The gladiatorial games were often inspired by reality, and fresh in the memory of Roman London was the vengeful wrath of a warrior queen. By bringing the gladiatrix into the arena in around AD 70, the rulers of Roman London would have achieved 2 goals. Firstly, female gladiators were a fresh distraction for an otherwise restless mob, and the amphitheatre helped to maintain the stranglehold of power. In addition, the Romans were harnessing the spirit of a woman who had brought their ordered society to its knees. Just 10 years before, the British warrior queen Boadicea, or Boudica, had turned this outpost of empire into a smoking ruin. Simon James believes Boudica taught the Romans a lesson they never forgot.
Whenever Rome conquered a new province, there was, of course, inevitably a period of settling down when there were many tensions to be sorted out as people adjusted to the new circumstances. In the case of Britain, around AD 60, things went seriously wrong because a lot of soldiers and officials got out of hand and started to beat up and abuse important Britons, and this triggered a huge explosion of resentment. Well, Queen Boudica, who had herself been flogged and her daughters had been raped by Roman soldiers, led an enormous army of aristocrats and apparently also ordinary people, over 100,000 of them, on a great campaign of vengeance and destruction, which resulted in the complete flattening of several new Roman towns in Britain, not least London itself. Very quickly, once the Romans re-established control, as they did within a few months, the city was re-established. Within a few years, the harbour was working again, and then we see the rapid redevelopment of the public buildings and the private properties, and the establishment of new institutional buildings too.
In just 10 years, Londinium was rebuilt, with control the top priority. The new amphitheatre was the focal point, providing a diversion for the increased army presence. With Boudica's memory hanging over the city, the time was ripe for the emergence of a strong female gladiator who could win glory through combat. Mike Fulford is an expert in the customs of the amphitheatre.
Gladiatorial contests didn't necessarily end in death. It depended on the crowd, it depended on the circumstances, it depended on the individuals and how they'd fought. And so both gladiators could have left the games unharmed and lived to fight another day. The important thing about the game is that this was a chance, by demonstrating in combat, armed combat, that you could be supreme, that you excelled in one of the great virtues of the Roman world. A successful gladiator would have earned considerable sums, and he would have retired wealthy, which allowed him to set up his own property, his family would have been secure, and in that respect, he would have earned his place in society. And of course, if you survived, and we know that many gladiators did survive after many, many games, then it's as if you were a retired, I don't know, sports player, you were a leading person, you were famous.
To scale the heights of Roman society was to climb to the top of the world. The empire stretched its tentacles across the globe, drawing wealth and power into Rome, along with new ideas. In Ridley Scott's epic Gladiator, the Colosseum is terrorized by female gladiators riding chariots. In real life, was this deadly attraction inspired by something the Romans saw in Britain? The movie's historical advisor was Harvard professor and classical scholar Kathleen Coleman.
There's one tiny hint that might suggest a female gladiator from Britain. We know that there were chariot-borne gladiators, and in the novel by Petronius, which was written in the reign of Nero after Claudius had conquered Britain, there's a reference to, in a fictitious context obviously, a female chariot-borne gladiator. Now, if the Romans, having encountered women driving chariots in Britain, as we know they did, had transferred that to the familiar context of the arena, they might have come up with the idea of having a female gladiator on a chariot.
The Romans often based their gladiatorial games on reality, and their experiences in Britain may have brought women into the amphitheatre. For 30 years from AD 59, the records tell of women killing beasts and fighting in the ring. Wild women spicing up the novelty and spectacle of the amphitheatre. London's Great Dover Street woman lived in this same period and may be the only case where archaeologists have found a female gladiator's actual remains. The ever-active volcano Vesuvius stands guard over the one other tantalizing possibility for human remains. The city of Pompeii was frozen in time during this key period of Roman history. It was engulfed by a sudden eruption of Vesuvius in August 79 AD. This is the oldest amphitheatre in the world, and gladiators must have been among the dead.
This is a porticus behind the theatre. And when it was excavated, it was found to be full of gladiatorial equipment. So gladiators must have been living here, at least when the eruption occurred. And possibly they were moved in here after the earthquake of AD 62. So maybe there were 15, 16 years during which gladiators were living here until that sudden destruction in 79.
More than just equipment was found in the gladiators' barracks. There is evidence that women died here, at around the same time that Great Dover Street woman died in London.
In these barracks, a number of skeletons were found, and 2 of those skeletons were associated with jewelry. So some people think skeletons and jewelry, the skeletons must have been female. If they were female, why were they here? Are we talking about gladiators' concubines? A contract with a local brothel? Are we talking about women just trying to escape the eruption and carrying their worldly wealth with them? There may be another explanation.
When the amphitheatre was first excavated over 200 years ago, there was little interest in the possibility of female skeletons. Vast quantities of bones were stored beneath the city streets. If the bones of a woman could be found and examined today, they might reveal the wounds from a life of combat in the arena.
Here are the skulls of the people of Pompeii, some of them. And these must have been people who watched the spectacles in the amphitheatre. These could even be some of the gladiators that were found in the gladiatorial barracks. Everything's just piled here. So there's no means of telling who was who. More bones. They seem to have been arranged according to size. But which ones belonged with whom? That's gone. And there's no way of putting these people together. These are not complete skeletons. If we wanted to try and establish the gender of the person found among all that gold jewelry in the barracks, we wouldn't be able to put that person together from these piles of bones.
Pompeii is a dead end. Kathleen Coleman turns her spotlight on a stone relief in the British Museum. Rock-solid evidence of fighting women that suggests a link between the Gladiatrix and the ancient myth of the Amazons. The British Museum houses a key piece of pictorial evidence, suggesting that female gladiators had their origins in a powerful ancient myth. This stone relief, discovered in the 19th century, shows 2 women in gladiator pose. For decades, it has intrigued scholars like Professor Kathleen Coleman.
These 2 remarkable ladies come from Halicarnassus in modern Turkey, which was part of the Greek East under the Roman Empire. And what we're seeing here are, in fact, 2 gladiators in combat. 2 gladiators facing each other in a fighting stance, and they're heavily armed with these oblong curved shields. The left-hand gladiator is wearing an arm guard, which is composed of wrappings of leather around the length of the arm. She's also got a short sword, and so has the right-hand gladiator. Remarkably, the breast is showing that this protagonist is clearly female. Unfortunately, there's damage at breast height on the right-hand figure. The figure on the left has a very feminine hairstyle with a braid around the forehead and a bun at the nape of the neck. But the inscription at the bottom tells us incontrovertibly that these are both women because they're named Amazon and Achillea, the feminine form of the name Achilles, the name of one of the great Greek heroes. Amazon, of course, is the word for an Amazon in Greek.
The stone clearly suggests that female gladiators were linked to the Amazon legend of giant fighting women, dating back to more than 1,000 years BC. The mythical Amazon capital was in what is now northern Turkey, which the Romans conquered along with the rest of Asia Minor. The Romans were known to take myths from defeated nations and play them out in the arena. So did these powerful stories of warrior women inspire the emergence of the gladiatrix? One version of the Amazon myth takes them into what is now Russia. But was it really just a myth? The Romans themselves did find fierce fighting women on these bleakest frontiers of the empire. Samara, 450 miles southeast of Moscow in modern-day Russia. New archaeological evidence proves that this harsh landscape supported a proud race of tall, fighting women. The people here were known to have traded with the empire, and there is evidence that their warlike women would have given the Romans a powerful reminder of the ancient legend. Janine Davis Kimball was the first foreign scientist allowed into the former Soviet Union to work with Samara's archaeologists.
Is this Pokrovka?
К сожалению, нет. Это эпоха Брон.
Oh, these are the Pokrovka boxes. Look, it says Pokrovka.
Her excavations at Pokrovka, close to the modern city of Samara, focused on 50 burial mounds called kurgans. They dated from 600 BC through to the 3rd century AD, and provided evidence that the Amazon myth had some basis in reality. In this warlike society, far more women than men were buried with weapons.
These weapons are how we really know that the Sarmatian women were warriors. They were buried with daggers like this one, and they also had swords, which are incredible because they're so very long. With this, they would have had to definitely fight on horseback because they're too long to be used on the ground. The sword for the men and the women is essentially the same kind of weaponry. The only difference that there would have been is the length of the hilt might have been a little larger for men than for the women. We can definitely prove that the women were involved in warfare. We've excavated women that have had arrows actually embedded into bone. And we have this female who suffered an extremely serious trauma, a blow on the head, and then it is healed, causing this huge growth of bone. One of the young warrior women at Pokrovka was buried with 40 arrowheads like these. And today that may not seem like a lot of value, but by the time you gather up the bronze and make it and cast it, that's a considerable amount of wealth to go in the burial, and she had other artifacts in addition, so they seem to be of higher status as a whole than men.
Some of the key discoveries relate directly to the period when the Romans were trading here. In an age when the average woman was under 5 feet tall, the local women were giants.
We have a very long face, very heavy Europoid face, and we have very, very strong bones in this woman. And this is typical of these women. They were about 5'5", 5'6", very robust kind of people.
Stories like this travelled the empire with the Roman legions. These women would have made a deep impression, with their stature and fighting spirit bringing the Amazon legend back to life. This potent combination of myth and reality the Romans saw around them would be woven into the ritual of the amphitheatre. Ritual dominated the daily routine of the gladiators. Even in the arena, with their lives at stake, they had to obey the rules of combat. Experts believe top gladiators would enter the arena just 2 or 3 times a year, spending the rest of their time in the ludus, or training school. Kathleen Coleman examines the ludus at the Colosseum in Rome.
Now, in this training school, gladiators would have lived and been trained and practiced, presumably in front of an actual audience, because up here we see the remnants of what would have been the stands, which held several thousand people, actually.
Gladiators are known to have trained with wooden swords, a method later adopted for training Roman soldiers.
We know that gladiators were trained here by highly specialized trainers, so that for a particular gladiatorial style, you would have had a trainer who specialized in that style. And so sophisticated were the methods that the gladiators were trained in, that on their epitaphs they specifically mention if they could fight in more than one style. That was something really exceptional. And if you could fight in as many as 3 styles, you really were Superman.
Or superwoman. But Great Dover Street woman's grave had no weapons, and unfortunately no epitaph survives. There is therefore no record of her fighting styles, but there is plenty of information on the types of equipment she would have used. Weapons and armour reveal the techniques of combat, when interpreted by experts like Peter Connolly.
The only way to find out how it works is to make an absolutely accurate copy. In other words, go and have a look at the thing in the museum, measure it, examine it carefully, and then, by analysing the aspects of it, see what it is designed for, and therefore you can guess how the person fought. Take, for example, the helmet of the Secator. It is designed specifically for certain purposes. Looking normally, if you just stand looking in front of you and can move your eyes, you can see about 150 degrees. And you are conscious of things that happen actually slightly round further than that. When you've got this on, it's limited to 1/3 of that. 50 degrees is your limit. The eyes cannot be attacked. The narrow gap between the 2 eye holes probably related very much to the trident, so the trident could not possibly go through and go into the eyes. The retiarius, on the other hand, did not have a helmet, but wore this extended shoulder guard fitting over the shoulder, and it enabled the person to duck their head behind it if a blow was coming straight at their eyes. This also, notice the curve of it, which If the blow is coming high towards the level of the eyes, it would slide down, not up. Again, taking it away from the eyes. The eyes were the most important thing, because if you blinded, the fight is over, and a very good fighter could actually lose their career, which might have lasted for years.
Gladiators often used the gladius, the distinctive Roman weapon that conquered the world.
The sword of the period, which is the late 1st century AD, is this sword. It's the same sword being used by the legionaries. It is a thrusting and hacking sword. It's a very basic sword. It has a point that can do sufficient damage to kill somebody. The stance for using it for both men and women is the same. You can see it on the Achillea and Amazon relief. You're putting as little of your body as possible under threat from your opponent, and you're going in for a thrusting position like that.
What began as slave fights had evolved into a heavily ritualized spectacle combining art, theatre, and lethal sport. The Gladiatrix was another symbol of change, but Roman entertainment was becoming increasingly depraved, and the most disturbing practices were yet to come. This powerful fighting figure was to turn that world upside down. The first woman to enter the amphitheatre as a gladiator was probably something of a novelty act. In AD 70, the London amphitheatre had just opened, but gladiatorial games had been in full swing throughout the Roman Empire for around 400 years. The hour of the gladiatrix had arrived. In the quest for novelty to satisfy the crowd, organisers had already added animal fights to the contests of man against man. Variety was now the order of the day.
It became a greater and greater spectacle. You try and make the performance more exciting than the last one. We have sources which describe hundreds of wild animals, from Africa, from Syria, from all parts of the empire, bringing in stags from Britain, for example, and mixing them in different combinations. So there was a sort of experiment going on there all the time, and you'd want to do better, because obviously people they remember what the last games were like, and they'd be looking for some novelty.
Historical records show that the seats were full by mid-morning, as citizens and slaves crammed into the stands to watch the day's action. The programme started with beast fights. Evidence of this use of animals has been found in the excavation of the London amphitheatre.
So the species we have include things like horses, cow, we have some pigs as well. We did have dogs, and Roman Britain was well known for the hunting dogs that were exported from Britain actually to the continent. So it seems likely that dogs that had been specially trained were used in the arena for these combats.
The excavation of the amphitheatre at London's Guildhall site also revealed the remains of a bear and the skulls of a number of bulls, including one found in a Roman drainage ditch.
We found a massive skull in one of these drains. It's very large and very heavy, but this was it, and it was placed just like this, straight into a drain. This one's odd. Its horns have been chopped off. There are marks at the back where it's been cut. It's also a very massive example and very difficult to interpret what it's doing in this drain. Another peculiarity is it's not been slaughtered in the normal way. This other example from the Guildhall site shows quite nicely how these animals are normally slaughtered, which is simply by belting a pole into their brains.
Modern bullfights probably had their origins in the Roman amphitheatre. But the Romans also used bulls for a more sinister purpose. The gladiatrix was entering an arena in which women were subjected to perverse forms of torture.
One of the most alien ways in which women, from our point of view, were associated with the arena was as victims in the type of spectacle which involved a public execution. And there is one piece of evidence which suggests that a female prisoner was actually used in a mythological setting as the equivalent of Pasiphae, who fell in love with the bull on the island of Crete and actually mated with it. And clearly, if this were performed in the arena, no woman would survive a congress of that nature, but then if she was a prisoner, she wasn't meant to survive.
In the 1st century, the Emperor Nero indulged his desire to reenact mythical stories involving animals. The Roman historian Suetonius makes direct reference to a woman hidden in a wooden cow who was mated with a bull. To achieve the desired display, the bull's instincts were probably manipulated using pheromones, the animal's own biological secretions.
The Romans would have been well aware of the behaviour of their animals. They were much closer to animals than we are today. They would have observed the behaviour of the male looking for prospective mates. They would have, I'm sure, been aware of the secretions produced by the females on heat. So it's quite conceivable that, yes, they could have, in fact, used bulls in that way. I mean, it may have required some form of training to get them to mount something that's not a bull.
In this perverted arena, a gladiatrix would at least have had a fighting chance of survival. Less fortunate slave women were dispensable victims, waiting in terror to discover what hideous excesses the organizers would think of next.
It's the most awful thing to think this could have actually happened if the Romans had kept these bulls, not used them for a couple of weeks. These bulls would be rearing to go and be willing to mount. A beef bull can be up to 1.5 tons in weight, whereas the dairy breeds are lighter, but a Holstein can be nearly 6-7 foot tall. And they're surprisingly fast. And you'd have a job moving out of the way.
As human victims waited in the ring, their animal attackers were prepared for a dramatic entrance. There was a vast network of machinery and hidden trapdoors underneath amphitheatres, like this one at Trier in Germany. As ever, death came from below, from the underworld.
This is the subterranean area of the Trier amphitheatre. It served the same functions as the subterranean area of the Colosseum in Rome. In the middle of this hall, we have a large pool, and in this pool we discovered a scenic machine which was used to have animals lifted up to the surface, maybe to have dead animals or even dead gladiators removed from the surface. In the Roman period, when there were games, there must have been a very impressive atmosphere downstairs. It was dark, it was wet. There were people busy with organizing killing activities. We know from Roman inscriptions and Roman literary sources that people consider this to be also a place of martyrdom.
But historical records suggest that some women escaped the fate of these helpless victims. In the 1st century AD, the Emperor Domitian had women fighting after dark by torchlight. Since the special thrill of mortal combat was usually saved for last in the amphitheatre's running order, it appears that these women were taking on a more powerful role. As female gladiators, they had become the main attraction. The accepted academic view of the gladiatrix as a sexual sideshow is about to be turned upside down. A clue to the puzzle of the Halicarnassus stone relief is suggested by Kathleen Coleman.
There are various details here which show us that we're dealing with real, formally trained gladiators. One is the fact that they are equipped in regular gladiatorial costume and they're in the stance of regular gladiatorial combat. There's nothing mocking about their attire, and there is nothing wimpish about their stance either. I think what we have here admittedly accommodates maybe a certain degree of titillation on the part of the male viewer in that the torso is bare, as indeed it would be in this style of gladiator. The viewer who viewed the actual combat might have felt a sexual thrill at seeing the naked breast, just as apparently female spectators found male gladiators sometimes sexually arousing.
A new interpretation of the most puzzling aspect of the carving challenges the notion that these women were simply novelty acts.
Now, there's one curious thing about them, and that is that they're not wearing helmets. But there are two funny objects at the bottom here on either side of the plinth that the figures are standing on. And these rounded objects were once interpreted as spectators' heads, although it's rather a funny place for spectators to be positioned relative to these combatants. And what I think we do have here are helmets. You can see the crown, the brim, the visor, and the neck guard, and these are presumably the helmets worn by the two women, and they've taken them off. The question is why? One of the things that signifies either the admission of defeat or at least the admission of having reached a stalemate is to remove part of one's armor, either the shield or very commonly the helmet. You will notice that these helmets are resting right way up. They obviously haven't fallen off, and they symbolize for the illiterate viewer the admission of a stalemate, which generates the result of a reprieve for both combatants. These women are being depicted as full-scale, proper paid-up gladiators. They represented, as all gladiators did, the kernel quality of the arena, which was virtus, which is courage, manly courage. The word virtus comes from the root vir, which means man in Latin. And the anomaly here, of course, is that this quality is being displayed by female combatants.
This would explain why Great Dover Street woman's lavish grave was set apart from the rest. Through a demonstration of courage in the arena, she could have achieved wealth and status, but never true acceptance. Like the male gladiators before her, the Gladiatrix had challenged the barriers of Roman society. Women were tightly classified in Roman law, from the slave, through the freeborn to the highborn citizen. In the arena, seating was determined by status, the most important to the front, women towards the back, in inferior seats. Roman men expected women to be chaste and moral, the guardians of the home, tending to domestic duties and the children. These were virtues embodied by the Vestal Virgins, 6 incorruptible priestesses who were the only women allowed to sit close to the action. A physically powerful woman like the Gladiatrix must have been an uncomfortable thrill for Roman men.
A female gladiator is a hugely paradoxical notion for Romans. The spectacle of an athletic, confident woman wielding a sword, I suppose, might well have been found exciting in all sorts of different ways for the Roman male viewer. I mean, in some ways, such a figure is is perhaps embodying the worst fears of the anxious Roman male. You know, this is really what's lurking inside every apparently demure Roman female, kind of the gladiator waiting to get out.
Before the time of Great Dover Street Woman, a number of Roman laws were passed concerning the amphitheatre. Early in the 1st century AD, freeborn women under 20 were barred from combat. Then it became any woman or man of high status, so it wasn't just slaves or prisoners who became gladiators. Perhaps the gladiatrix wanted to fight.
I think the notion of a female gladiator is known to be from the senatorial or equestrian elite would have been a very shocking thing for a Roman audience. The traditional ideal of the Roman matron is a whole world away from the woman who puts her body on display in the arena, who takes on masculine virtues, acquires masculine skills, and takes pleasure in providing entertainment.
Whatever class she emerged from, a gladiatrix would have ended her days as an outcast. Like the young and wealthy woman buried in Roman London, with artifacts that link her compellingly to the amphitheatre. The position of her grave, the very fact that first alerted archaeologists to her story, reveals a woman who fell outside the normal boundaries of society. A player in the story of how a sexual sideshow developed into high-level sport between professional athletes. And the image is as unsettling today as it was 20 centuries ago. The thrilling, ambiguous image of a woman who fights.
Straight to her.